Powerful Play Through Responsive Planning, Teaching, and Documentation by Anne Rush and Jennifer Brown.
Kia ora, I'm Anne Rush and I'm the Transition to School New Entrant Teacher and Team Leader of our fabulous TUI team here at Northcote Primary School.
Kia ora, I'm Jenn Brown. I'm a new entrant teacher here at Northcote Primary as well. And we are two very passionate play advocates. Play is very well established as a teaching and learning pedagogy on our TUI team.
We had a fabulous time earlier this year with two learning experiences that ended up being beautiful, meaningful, authentic and impactful for us and our learners, and we're really looking forward to sharing them both with you today.
To support you with this, we will provide you some inspiration in regard to documentation and experiences. We look forward to you joining us on our powerful play journey.
Join us today as we share two joint collaborative play experiences, as well as big book and shared book plans, along with daily reflective planning and an example of long-term curriculum mapping.
So this whole experience came about because as teachers over the holidays, Jenn and I had been purchasing resources, and we both had managed to come up with some eggs we both got off Marketplace. And we were talking at school about what we could do with them. We were all excited about it and thinking of how we could link this into literacy and other kind of areas and engage the children and get some rich play happening. And we were kind of talking about it, and I mentioned the Fantail book because I've used this book a lot over the years. It's one of my favourite texts. I know it links into lots of other learning. It's a good linking book in terms of getting the children hooked on and then sort of taking it wider depending on what they do. So anyway, Jenn and I had been talking about it and we were figuring out how we could kind of do this. We both had small class sizes, which kind of makes working collaboratively a lot easier in terms of managing spaces and managing children, and also for everyone to get a really good taste of an experience. So we decided, okay, we'd have these eggs, we'd use these eggs, and I can see one right here that I've got. This is one of my little eggs. It's actually a little wooden egg, and I happen to have two of them the same in what we purchased. So I kind of thought, okay, what could we do? So we talked at school and we thought, okay, we haven't got a lot of outdoor spaces outside our class that we can use. What do we want to do to get the children out into a natural play, make the use of the spaces we do have? And we kind of somehow came up with the idea of hiding the eggs and kind of seeing what happens, all with having this kind of behind us if it went that way, if the children's learning took it that way. So we decided to plan this. Jenn would have the kids, I think, and read them a story, and I would go out and hide the eggs. I got enthusiastic and did it before school, and then I had second thoughts because I was worried that someone would go and find them and take them. So I went and got them back, brought them back to class, and I think at brain food time, Jenn read the children a book. I went outside and hid the eggs in the crook of one of our beautiful Pahutakara trees behind our hall, and there already sits little sticks and leaves and bits and pieces. So I just tucked them in there, and then we kind of said to our children, how about we go outside and get some fresh air and go and play in the trees? And they always loved that. So we kind of went round there. We didn't really say anything, just talked about safety and climbing and all those kind of things, and just basically waited to see what would happen. So luckily the children went into this tree where we'd hid the eggs, and they found them, and it was just priceless. The children's faces as the eggs, and they were so excited. And it's really hard as a teacher. You want to get in there, but you actually need to let the children do this and just listen to what they're saying, and very gently drop on, I wonder, or have we thought about, oh my goodness, imagine if, and all those kind of things. But we kind of kept it quite cool, calm. We stepped back a bit, took lots of photos, and then we sort of talked about, well, what are we going to do with these eggs? We found these two eggs. There's no mum to keep them warm. What are we going to do? And the children at that stage didn't even mention that they might be fake eggs. They were so engaged and so hooked into this that the idea didn't even sort of happen. So we sort of said, well, what about if we, what could we do with them? And then because there's two and there were two classes, the children came up with the idea of, oh, maybe we could have one each. So we said, great, let's do this. Well, what are we going to do with these eggs? So Jenn stayed with the children around the tree, and I took one child from each class, which was a highly sought after job, who was going to be the person to come back to class, and maybe find some quick little resources or something soft that we could put the eggs in to transport back to class. So I went back, we both got little tissues and little bits and pieces from class, and then we gently went back and we put the eggs gently into our little containers to take them back to class. And the children managed this beautifully, even though they were all so keen. There wasn't any fighting or any argy-bargy about who was going to touch them. It just seemed to just magically just kind of happen. And it was actually quite beautiful, and I sort of remember that feeling of how we felt, and it was just a magical time. The sun was shining, it was a beautiful day, it just kind of happened. So we did that, we both went back to our classes, and we kind of talked about what we could do next. And the children kind of came up with the idea that we might need a bigger nest. So we looked around class, and I had one of those big donut cushions with a hole in the middle. So that kind of started off first as our nest. And they put tissues in it and a bit of sheep's wool and other bits and pieces we had. And then they decided that they wanted to make the nest bigger. So I was thinking, well, what could we do for that? And then they kind of, with a few dropping of words and little gentle questioning and wonderings, they decided we could maybe go back out and get some more sticks and things. So we did that, came back, and even the process of collecting sticks was beautiful. The children just didn't go out there and grab bundles of sticks and things and leaves. They were actually looking and being very careful with what they chose to make the nest. They weren't choosing big long sticks or thick ones. They were making sure, how do you think this is going to feel with all the other bits and pieces? So we kind of did that, and that was our first sort of day, and that kind of overtook the day. I had again Fantail sitting in the background, and while we were in the afternoon, we were just getting a bit tired. I said, well, I've got this great book. It's about a Fantail. Maybe we could have a look at that. So the children were super excited. So we kind of got that book out, had a read and had a talk about it. And that was the kind of the end of that day. I didn't give up the readers. I thought I'd save that for later in the week, depending on how it went for my children. So the next day, I had these resources. I've got a lot of these resources here. So I thought, well, I'll pop some of these out, but I didn't put the whole lot out. I just started with one little tui up here. And over the week, I added lots of these bits and pieces. Again, depending on what the children were doing, they floated in and out of the play with these. It sort of melded in with the tui, because we were doing tamariki tui for Mighty, our Mighty program, and it kind of went into that. The books, we've got lots of books here as well that I had in the background that I could use, and there are lots of curriculum links you could take it in there, but I really wanted to see the play. I really wanted to see where the play would go. My children were they were real constructors. They were real innovators and constructors at that time. And the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what they did. But just to wrap this up, probably the overarching experience or overarching feeling or memory I have from this actually makes me feel quite tearful, because it's quite emotional thinking about it. I had this beautiful little boy in my class who was having some really big family problems, and he was finding coming to school and settling at school in the morning really, really tricky. And quite by chance, I kind of used the distraction technique of, come on, let's come and help me check the egg and see if it's still there. So we did, and that kind of started this thing with him, and that was this calming thing. He'd come into class, he'd look for the egg, he'd go and hold the egg if he was feeling a bit sad, and he often would come up to me and say, Mrs. Rush, can I go and hold the egg? And I'd say, of course, away you go. And it kind of became quite magical for them, and especially for this little boy. It became, as I said, his settler, his karma for him. And this was really evidenced later on when we moved from tamariki tui. We were looking at feelings with some of the monster books, and on reflecting on this, he came up with this off the top of his head thing, which made me think that this is actually sitting there. This is really important for him. And he said, I feel calm when I hold that mystery egg that we found. And that was just so beautiful. just this little egg could engender that feeling of calm, protectiveness, nurturing. It was just so lovely.
Here are some photos from the experience taken across the day, starting from the initial, more teacher-guided experience, moving into the deeper child-led play that sparked from this. From the get-go, the deep sense of ownership and care towards the egg was obvious in the way that the children gelled when taking turns, creating the nest, with no challenges, just sharing, taking turns. It just seemed to flow across the day beautifully. It culminated in the last photo with one child making obvious learning links to previous learning that we'd done in relation to speech bubbles, asking me to write a go-away speech bubble so people coming in would know not to touch. And it was clear from the way that this was articulated to me that go-away was not meant in an unkind way. It came from a real sense of being protective towards the egg. Across the day, all of the children flowed in and out of this play, and it was just beautiful to observe. These photos are from the play that took place in the days and weeks after the initial experience. Obviously, some of the potential loose parts and resources that you can see were readily available, but the children weren't directly guided to these by me. The play was technology-based initially, with the maker table in hot demand, and the children created objects and devices that the fantails could use, although you will note that in the photo, the tuis are in the nest. As mentioned previously, we had moved into 2 meki tui, and those tuis were just taking their turn. The children asked me to write the sign that you can see for them, and I could have supported them to write the words, but I felt that at that time, by doing that, we may have lost the magic. So a happy medium was with them signing it. The 2 photos with the green arrows were taken right at the end of term, and by then the egg was just part of the class and included in a lot of what the children were doing in their play. Such a powerful piece of play and learning for all, and a real privilege to be part of.
Okay, so because it was my first year as a new entrant teacher, I didn't have a whole lot of experience coming up with these really innovative and creative hooks to get kids drawn into their learning or the big shared book. And so I was really keen to collaborate, and Anne, obviously, as you would have already heard, had the great idea of the mystery egg. So when we took the kids out to go tree climbing and brought the egg back, the play was definitely different in my classroom than into Anne's. And part of that was me still learning about my students and still learning how to notice and recognize and respond to what they were into and where their play would take them. But one of the things is they were very concrete thinkers. Out of all of my children, they all said, with the exception of one, they all said the egg was either a bird or a fantail. I did have one that said that inside the egg was a cat, which then got us on to a really good discussion about eggs and what comes out of eggs: mammals, birds, reptiles, and they were definitely more into the scientific and biological aspect, I guess, of the experience. And that was great because we were actually the next week going to do a forest school type activity with conscious kids. And so my children were really excited. They knew that was happening. They were really excited about being outside and doing all the nature play. And as a result, the play in my class, while the egg was a part of it, the egg was not a central theme, I guess. They really got into the birds, the native New Zealand birds and wildlife. And so this setup, I would obviously not have set up on the first day, but I might have a few bits and pieces and add to it over the week. But they absolutely loved the birds. They would make homes for them all around the classroom, and they wouldn't play necessarily just at this table. They'd go into the blocks and they'd go over to the maker table and make houses for them. They would put them in our cars and our buses and go into the library and make pillow forts with the birds. And so that then got them onto the birds. We ended up going outside at one point to this was driven by them to do a tally of how many birds we had around the school, or that we could spot at the school. And so we don't have a whole lot of, as Anne mentioned, a whole lot of outdoor space for birds to congregate in, but that ended up taking us outside, and we then went through the garden and through the trees, and we came across a lot of native New Zealand insects. And so that kind of led us on to our next topic of inquiry, which was the native New Zealand insects, specifically the kihikihis, the cicada, which were out and abundant, and they were leaving their shells all over the place. So we ended up incorporating that into our play the following week. And this kind of nature theme and play continued over the next few weeks. And so while it all started with the egg, our play definitely went in a different direction, and it was still really awesome to see. And as the year, for me, progressed, my confidence and my ability to create these kind of innovative experiences and these hooks to draw the kids in became better and better, and we'll see later, I feel much more confident.
So you can see here in these three pictures, when we came back to my classroom after reading the book with Anne and her kids, my kids immediately set off to create a nest. And so we looked at the stuff that we had available in the classroom. They went to the maker table. I said, oh, I've got this tray we can go collect things on, which they were super keen to do. We immediately went into the garden, and they started collecting leaves and flowers and tissues and whatever else they could find outside, and brought it back in. But you can see they kind of went small scale here. This is just a small little egg carton. They were very adamant they didn't want it to be crushed. One of the little boys, he was like, we need to make a sign that says do not touch. And so we made that on cardboard, and it was a beautiful, authentic piece of writing, one of the first pieces of writing that these little boys had done. And you can see here two of my little girls just holding the egg, being very gentle and very caring with it. But again, the play in our class kind of went a different direction. And here's an example of where our play went in a different direction. So we were talking about, oh, I wonder if we can see any fantails. And I told the kids that, oh, I had seen some fantails here at the school, and they were in our compost bin. And I asked them if they knew why they would be in the compost bin. And after eating fantail, they put together really quickly, oh, there's a lot of flies. So we decided to take a little trip over to the compost and the garden. And, when there's 6 or 7 little kids running up, the fantails are going to scatter. So we didn't see any fantails, but we did see a lot of insects. And so we kind of, even mid-course, started changing our tally and survey to, oh, I wonder how many insects we can find. And so you can see them right here in the garden doing their tally marks, looking for different insects. And that took us into a different path. The next week, we found all of these cicada shells. And so you can see here they are. We were putting them on tens frames and going outside and seeing if we could find any. And like I said in the video, they just went in a much more natural and kind of scientific, almost mathematical way, which was also really cool to experience.
This is our shared book plan for Fantail, and we use the same template for all our shared books. The potential teaching ideas across the week in the top part aren't set in stone. They are just a guide, and we use 1 or 2 of these from each day that best suit our children's current learning needs. These documents are stored on our shared Google Drive, and we link these into our daily planning so we don't have to reinvent the wheel each time we use a specific book. We like to layer the learning, with our Friday poem usually being connected to our shared book in some way. The poem or poems pictured may not necessarily be what everyone uses, just an idea, as again we tailor these to our children's interests and needs. These plans are rich, collaborative, living documents that we continue to add to with any anecdotal or reflective notes that we individually make going into our own weekly planning.
Okay, so after the success with the fantail experience, joint experience, Anne and I knew that we wanted to do another similar type experience where we could hook the kids into the learning and just kind of see where they took it. However, the stars didn't quite align, and it wasn't until term 4 that we were able to finally come back together and create this new experience. By the time term 4 rolled around, I had had some of my kids for almost the entire year, and so I knew them really well. My play journey had come quite a ways by that point, and I knew what the kids were into. Specifically, they were very into magical creatures and mythical beings and just elements of magic. And so I knew before the term even started that this was the term I was going to bring out my dragon imaginative play. And I had a lot of this stuff because my son was really into dragons when he was little, and then I've just added kind of bits and pieces, obviously, from op shops and Trade Me and things like that as the years have gone by. So I had a pretty big dragon collection, and I knew my kids would be into it. But the thing was, how do I hook them in? And so Anne and I had really long conversations. They involved my husband and my son as well, and we knew that we were going to use dragons as our text. However, kind of as we went along, we realized that dragons, while it does have dragons, it doesn't really have a magical or mythical element to it, but it does go really well with our Mighty program that we have here at Northcote. And so we still wanted to use the text, but maybe more as a supporting material rather than the primary text for the week. Now the thing is Anne and I discussed all of these different ways to hook the kids in, and we kept coming back to a dragon egg. Well, as you would have already seen, we've already done an egg. And I had some of Anne's learners that were in her class, and obviously I had a few of mine that had already done the egg experience. And so for me, I had to figure out a way to somehow do an egg that would not have those kids that had already experienced the fantail mystery egg thinking, oh, we've already done this, you know, oh, I don't want to do this, we know what's in it. And so I got to thinking, okay, well, a dragon egg is probably big. It's not the size of, you know, a fantail egg or even a chicken egg. And we came to the idea of using an ostrich egg. And so this is an ostrich egg, and I found this on Trade Me, and Anne has one as well. And then we just painted it with some gold paint and some green and used that for our hook. So I know that both of our experiences are around eggs, but this one is definitely a little bit different. And with those kids that Anne had and the kids that I had that had already experienced the fantail, this did not diminish, the fact that it was another egg did not diminish the magic and mythical element at all going into this experience. So yes, so the experience itself, what I ended up doing for my kids, which was different from what Anne, you'll hear what Anne does different later. My kids were very into receiving letters and post and things like that we had already done earlier in the year. So our school admin came in around brain food time, around 10 a.m. with a package and this beautiful box that she had delivered. And it was addressed to our class. So we opened it up, we inspected it together, and inside was the egg and a letter addressed to room 2 from the Ministry of Unknown Creatures at Drac Caverns in Spain. And if you haven't looked up the Drac Caverns, D-R-A-C-H, very cool. It definitely looks like a dragon could come out of there. So I showed them some pictures of that. We talked about how it was so hot. Look, the letter is singed around the edges. What could have possibly have caused it? What do they think? And that got them started. There were amazing conversations happening about, well, it's a dragon inside the egg. It's very clearly a dragon. Well, why is that? Well, because the cave is hot, and so it's probably a volcanic cave. I had another little girl say, but volcanic caves, but all the volcanoes are extinct around here. Well, are they extinct everywhere? So they got into these really deep discussions about geology and, well, maybe this isn't from New Zealand. Maybe it's not a New Zealand volcano. There are active volcanoes. So the discussion that happened around what is in the egg was just amazing. And the egg, they couldn't see it at the time. The egg looked whole to them inside the box. So I asked them, well, what should we do? We were asked to take care of it. We were asked to keep it safe. So they decided to come up with the idea of creating a hatchery for it. So we had a big tough tray, and there's pictures later in the PowerPoint, and I'll show you those. And they created this beautiful hatchery for the egg. And so each day, the egg cracked a little bit more and more. And on day 3, the egg hatched after school. So the kids didn't get to see it hatching, but what they did get to see the next day was a video that I happened to capture of the dragon coming out of the egg. Oh my gosh, and it flew out our window. So naturally, they decided to do a dragon hunt, and we went around the school, and they did an amazing job of finding clues as to the baby dragon's whereabouts. And I thought that I was going to have to come up with ideas for them to find, but they did it all on their own. They came up with reasons why a pipe cleaner found in our garden was a sign that the baby dragon had been there. And my favorite clue was that the dragon, they were a little worried maybe it eats people, but we instead found out that dragons eat fruit, or this baby dragon eats fruit because there were bananas missing off of the banana tree. And so it was just really amazing to hear their verbal reasoning skills and for them to tell me why the scratched up tree was a sign of the baby dragon. And my favorite quote from one of our little boys in the class said, every single one of the clues is cheeky. We know it's a cheeky dragon. And so I just loved that. And yeah, and we were able to tie in their play as well with the post and with the letters to this amazing book that I highly recommend called Dragon Post by Emma Yarlett. And on every page, there's a little boy who writes different letters, and he receives different letters about his dragon. And so the kids were so engaged. They were so interested in writing letters to the Ministry of Unknown Creatures to find out more about their dragon. They set up brilliant imaginative play sets with the blocks and at the maker table and with their hatchery. And they decorated their hatchery with a lot of these really cute little signs, and you can see the authentic and just really engaged writing that they're doing. I didn't tell them go make a sign for the dragon hatchery. They were onto it themselves. They wanted to do it. My favorite is from a little girl who, like Anne, she had a little boy that was having trouble settling. I had a little girl who was relatively new to my class that term and having trouble settling in every morning, leaving her mother. But when we did the dragon egg experience, she just came to life. She would bring her mother in to show her. She would send her mother off like, okay, I'm good, you can go now. I need to read to the baby dragon. And this was her sign that she made, and it said, "I love creature." So again, she didn't know what was in the egg at that time. And then just lots of examples of, again, authentic writing. What's inside the egg? Look and see if the egg is hatching. And I like, this one was made to hang from the hatchery. I like to look at the egg. And so then, once the egg had hatched and the dragon had flown off, I let them play with the egg. They were really gentle with it though. They didn't want to pick it up and move it. So we would set like a dragon inside of it, and they were good with that. But then their imaginative play, took it down the like the fairy tale route. So the next week we looked at doing castles and fairy tales, and then they were interested in the machinery of castles and looking at the drawbridges and the portcullis and things like that. And so we were able to move into machines. And so the play just really was amped up and taken up to the next level. And as a result, my play journey continued to, I guess, get better and better towards the end of the year.
Because Anne and I both had 18 students at this time, we weren't able to do the experience together. But the really rich, collaborative, I guess, and powerful thing that came out of this were our daily conversations. Anne and I had extensive talks every day about what we noticed our kids doing, how we were going to respond to what they were interested in, and just the joy we were both having watching them with these different experiences. It was so fun to come together at the end of the day and be like, oh my gosh, this is what my kids were into, and this is what they did, and look at this writing, and look at this, just this making, and how much they care for this little thing. Here's some more examples of the powerful play that took place, as well as the video that students got to see of the dragon hatching from the egg. And this was made with an app called Imagipets. So not super realistic, but to a 5-year-old, they loved it. Here you can see this was the little girl that was reading to the baby egg, or to the baby dragon. And in the top left-hand corner, you can see our dragon hunt that the students decided to go on, as well as a dragon play invitation. Super simple, but the kids have the magic within them, and they are the ones who can take it and just make these really awesome, imaginative, elaborate setups. And the cones in the bottom right picture are set up around their play structures, and those are used as a way to keep other students or other people from coming in and destroying their creations. It works really well as a classroom management tool, and the kids really respect each other's space and property with the cones.
As with this experience, and in term 1, I had very new children. Some of them were so new, in fact, that only started school that very day. So I decided to go down the sensory route, as I knew that from what I'd noticed, the children were very hands-on, very tactile, like to get their hands into stuff and get a bit messy and ushy and squishy. So I decided that I would get a little dragon toy, this one here, and that would kind of be hatching out of an egg. And to make sure there was kind of a link, I had painted my egg a sort of grey, goldy colour, like the dragon. So that all went to plan, and I'd made my finger paint. Jen and I talked about what to do, and we were going to set it up at brain food time. But unfortunately, it was a wet day, so that plan went out the window, and we went back to plan B, which was after the wet morning tea, Jen took both of our classes out for a little stretch, and I snuck back into class and placed this egg in this little corner here. Obviously the egg was half in two halves, and I'd kind of put the slime in, I'd covered the dinosaur in it, I just had part of it poking out so you couldn't actually see what it was. I kind of tucked it in there, and when the kids came in to have their morning tea eating, I kind of hovered in front of this table so nobody would see it while they were eating, as I wanted them to have their food and then we could dedicate the rest of the day to it if it kind of went that way. So we did that, tucked it in there. I moved away after they'd eaten, and one of the little boys came up there and he spotted it straight away. And we did actually try to make a video, that's another story, that didn't go too well. So we kind of couldn't figure out what it was. They thought it might have been a dragon. They wanted to get it out of a corner, and I was like, we don't know what it is. What if we can't touch it? It might be poisonous. Obviously it wasn't. So they said, oh, get some gloves. So I went and got some gloves, and we kind of lifted it out and put it onto a tray. And I was thinking, well, what are we going to do next? And the children were like, let's open it, let's open it. So we all sat on the floor. I had a group of boys who were really, really into it. And so we kind of opened the egg up, used some tongs, figured out it was actually a dragon. And they were like, well, we need some water to wash it. So we got some water, they popped it in, they were washing the dragon clean, and just that joy on their face of discovering. And one child sort of, I remember, blurted out, oh, it's got writing on the bottom. But everyone else was so engaged, they didn't even take any notice of that. They just went with it. They were so engaged. And even when they were washing the dragon, some of the paint washed off the shell. And I was thinking, oh goodness, this is it. They're going to spot that it's not actually a dragon egg. But it didn't actually make any difference. They just saw it as cleaning the shell as well. So that was great. So we did that. We popped it up on a table, and we used this table here. I popped it up on this table, just kind of left it there. This is a great table with lots of children, as it had big numbers, just to see what would happen. So they decided to make it a nest or a home. So that, as usual, we nipped outside, grabbed some more leaves and bits and pieces, and they popped it up on made this kind of home. And I've got some photos here. I don't know whether you'll be able to see them terribly well, but this is part of my wall display. And you can see I've got the table here, they've got the leaves and the wood. They decided the dinosaur needed some friends, so they dragged out some dinosaur friends for it to play with. They made homes. They decided it needed a swimming pool, so we got the water out. We used the same bowl we'd rinsed it with. They did duct tape to tape things on there. They made a diving board. They did a bit on sinking and floating, because they put a little cardboard box in there, and hadn't really thought that it might sink after a while when it got wet. There was just so much learning on. They had a towel to dry it, multiple pools. Then they made lids on the pool so nobody would drown when the pools weren't being used. A couple of my children, as I said, had only been at school that day. They kind of stood back and watched, and when the other children moved off for a bit, those boys came in, and they really took that learning. It was just fabulous to see. So this kind of went across the day. In terms of where to next, on other days when it was actually nice, the dragons actually came outside. Now, I didn't have, like Jen, a lot of the actual plastic dragons. I kind of had more of the soft toy ones. But they went outside in the grass, and they got flown into the trees, and they made mobile homes. One of the very joyful things and powerful things I saw was with one of my little boys who just started school, who was a pretty much non-English speaker. He grabbed a book, and he was just having a good old browse of it. So in the end, I ended up, in terms of literacy, we read this book, and there just happens to be a little dragon at the end of this book, and the kids are like, oh wow, there's a dragon. And then we kind of moved into this book, which has got the Zog story in it. So this is kind of where my literacy came in. The children were so engaged with these books. They wanted to paint them. We made them out of clay. It was just fabulous. And then at the very end, we kind of moved into the Gruffalo and the Gruffalo's child. And it was just fabulous, a lovely end to the school year.
Here are some close-up photos from the teacher-led dragging egg experience and from the play across the day that followed, just so you get a better idea of what I was talking about in the previous slide. I could have made more slime once I realised how much the children loved that sensory aspect, but on reflection I think it could have ruined the magic of having a small amount in the egg just enveloping the dragon. I'm now going to share some student voice that I gathered when we discussed the photos the next day, as I think they capture that magical time beautifully. And my first little friend said, "We don't know how the egg got into room 1. It's a mystery. Mrs. Rush was on duty and our door was locked. Maybe room 2's door was open." My second little friend said, "I saw a spike thing with a tail sticking out of the egg, so I thought it could be a dinosaur or a dragon because I know that they hatch out of eggs." And my third little friend, "I put my finger in the goo. It felt sticky and gooey, but it smelled kind of ordinary. We thought the goo was safe because it didn't have a bad smell." So just to finish off, on the bottom right hand, there's a photo of the dragon and his friends on that nice little furry bed. And this, my last little friend said, "The dragon needed some friends, so the dinosaurs came for a sleepover. The next night the dragon is going to sleep by himself." Here's some play from the following days and weeks before we moved into the end-of-year busyness of school life. The dragons gradually migrated to the nature table area where the children dipped in and out of engaging with them. Of note, the dragons enjoyed an outside play experience in the grass. One got to hang out with our class tui, and some children created dinosaurs during maths using shapes and Play-Doh. One of my boys spent a lot of time creating a dragon home with lots of little gadgets for it, but it was really more about the creating than the dragon actually living in it. I don't think they even got to set foot in it, as he wanted to take his creation home to share with his mum. A couple of others persevered to put the egg back together again with another dragon inside, much like a puzzle at that stage, as it had broken into a few pieces, which they managed to do, with one saying, "We got the broken dragon egg to fit back together. We put another dragon inside. He even had an eating hole at the end," and you can see that in this picture with a green arrow in it. And just to wrap up, evidence that the dragon experience had migrated out of school when one of my girls brought in a beautiful little clay flying dragon that she'd made and even painted it, which she proudly shared with us for news.
So what's really great about this shared book planning, as Anne mentioned, is that it's a living document. And so even though we didn't use dragons as our main text for the week, it was really awesome to come down here and see what resources we had available and what learning experiences other teachers on our team had done. And it's a great way for us to collaborate, even though we're in these kind of single cell classrooms and we might not be doing everything exactly the same. There's a lot to draw on and a lot of resources to choose from. This is an example of daily reflective planning. In black, you can see what was initially planned for the day, and in purple, you can see the noticings, observations, and if the lesson ended up going in a different direction from what was initially planned. This is a good way to keep track of what your children are interested in, recording those observations, those noticings, to help you plan later on in the week and the weeks to come.
Once teaching through a play pedagogy became well established in our team, we found that using the more conventional long-term plans just wasn't the best fit for us. So we created the collaborative curriculum mapping document that you can see in the screenshots. It begins at the top with links to tamariki and to the key competencies, which you can see in the left-hand side screenshot. All curriculum areas with their AOs follow, with our shared book plans underneath, and it is linked into our weekly plans. This is all in the one document. We notate the same document for the year, so it becomes a rich record of learning across the team over the year. Obviously, this will be updated with the curriculum refresh. What we do is largely driven by the children and what we observe and learn about their interests, rather than us choosing the topic and context that we think they need to learn through. Observation and back planning are the key for us. Learning is usually introduced through literacy or a specific experience. That's why you'll see book titles in our notes, followed by the week and term and then our initials. We dedicate regular time at team meetings to notate and discuss, and over time we can track which curriculum areas are covered, and it also enables us to identify areas that we do need to get to. with robust and rich discussions on how we can do this in authentic contexts.